Hello everyone, welcome. I'm going to be going over how to do one of these limiting reactant problems that you've seen in class. Um, this is actually problem number 5 from the second practice on this. And the question is, in the reaction above, if you're supplied with 3.2 grams of C2H6 and 1.2 grams of O2, which do you need more of to produce as much water as possible? So that's the question. We're going to go ahead and try to solve this. So when you go to solve this, what you're going to do is you're going to look at each reactant separately. So I'm going to start with the C2H6. I'm told that I have 3.2 grams of it, so I'm going to start there. I'm going to write 3.2 grams of C2H6, and I'm going to put that over 1. You're then going to change it to moles. To change it to moles, you multiply it by the ratio related to its formula mass. Well, the formula mass of C2H6 is 30 grams per mole, but I want to get rid of the grams. So I want grams of C2H6 on the bottom, and I want moles of C2H6 on the top. And that relationship is 1 mole per 30 grams, that formula mass. That's going to get me to moles of C2H6. But ultimately, the question is asking about water. So my next step is to multiply it times a mole ratio related to the water. A mole ratio is going to be a mole value over a mole value. Now we need to get rid of the C2H6 that's on top here, so it's going to be on the bottom. C2H6 ran out of room there, but on your paper you would have C2H6. And on top we're looking for water, so I'm going to put water up there. The numbers that go with that ratio are the coefficients of the chemicals. So for the water, the coefficient is a 6, so I'm going to write 6 for the water. For the C2H6, its coefficient is a 2, so I'm going to put a 2 on the bottom. And at that point, I can go ahead and solve and get a numeric answer. In this case, my numeric answer for this comes out to be 0.32 moles of water. That's fine for the C2H6. Now we're going to do the exact same thing, but do this for the oxygen that we have. So I'm going to start with my 1.2 grams of O2, put it over 1, times 1 mole of O2 per its formula mass. Well, the formula mass of oxygen is 32 grams per mole. So we get rid of the grams of oxygen. And then that last step, again, we're asking about water. So we want moles of water over the moles. Now in this case, we need to get rid of the O2. And that relationship, the water, remember, has that 6 coefficient. The oxygen has a coefficient of 7. And so there's our setup. We now solve for that. And when you solve for this, you get 0.032 moles of water. For the final answer, you're going to compare your two answers that you had gotten, and you're going to look for the smaller one. And in fact, this is my smaller one that came from the oxygen, and that's my final answer. The oxygen is the one that you would need to add more of to produce as much water as possible. In other words, the oxygen is the limiting reactant. A couple of things when you're doing this problem that you really want to make sure of. You'll notice in here I have included units for everything except that first one that you put underneath. That one doesn't need units, but everything else needs units. And when I say units, I mean it needs like gram or mole, and it needs the appropriate chemical listed. So you'd want the full grams of C2H6, moles of C2H6, grams of C2H6, moles of water, moles of C2H6. You want to have all of those units listed when you take your AAA. If you don't have them, I've told you in class that that's part of the dimensional analysis, and the dimensional analysis you are not going to get greater than a 2, not meeting standard, if you don't include that. This is to try to prepare you for either AP Chem or college, where you absolutely will not get credit at all if you don't include those units in your dimensional analysis. So it's really important that you include them, you get those answers, you get the final correct answer, and you solve for these. So that's how you're going to solve all of them. You take what you're given, change it to moles, then multiply times the mole ratio of the chemical they're asking about, and then compare those answers. And that's how you do all of these problems. You should be in good shape for this AAA. Do not forget there may be a question that is specifically related to dimensional analysis that has nothing to do with chemistry. It's just looking at units and units canceling each other in a fraction type setup with your dimensional analysis. So don't be surprised if you see something like that. I have included this video and I have an answer key to that practice. Which do you need more of? Practice 2. Both of these are found here on Google Classroom. Hopefully they will help you. If not, shoot me an email. I'll try to get back to you before Thursday, before the AAA. Thanks.